drug abuse, cancer,
measles, diabetes, AIDS, cancer.
Good evening once again, and welcome to another episode of Doctor and Call. It's Tuesday evening, and of course, as always, we discuss issues that can help improve your wellness. We have a very special program for you this evening. We continue actually our discussion on public health, which we started 2 weeks ago. This evening, though, we would tie in the environment and see what role that plays, how that fits into the bigger picture. We have two very special guests with us, Dr. Kerry Mitchell and no stranger, Dr. Tessa Sincere. In a moment, we're going to allow them to introduce themselves so that you have a good understanding of who we're talking to and the expertise that they bring. Thank you, viewers of TV 7 and 11, GBN Television 7 and 11, K105 FM, and of course our friends on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. Dr. Mitchell, Dr. Sincere, good evening and welcome to Doctor and Call. I feel very honored to be in the presence of doctors this evening. Good evening and welcome again.
Good evening, Godfrey. Thanks very much for having me on again tonight. I trust you had a good day and that all is going well.
Yes.
I don't think I need to introduce myself again because I believe people know who I am. So I'll hand over to Dr. Mitchell.
Yes,
Good
indeed.
evening, Godfrey. Well, thank you for having me on this call. I'm looking forward to our conversation. The environment is something that's very near and dear to my heart. But my name is Kerry Mitchell, and one of the things I do is study the environment and see what we can do as individuals to reduce our exposure to environments that may not do us very well. So hopefully there's an opportunity for us to exchange some words on this topic, and I look forward to the conversation.
Yes, indeed. Very, very, very much so. We're going to get straight into it. I think, well, the week before when we started and when we looked at public health, I think Dr. Sincere did explain to us, in very simple terms, and we all understood, when we speak of public health, what we mean. But the question is, and Dr. Mitchell, I'm coming straight to you, how does environmental health fit into the bigger picture of community well-being? Let's start there.
That's an excellent question, to be honest. Environmental health underpins public health. There have been some studies over the years that have shown that around 70 to 80% of our health is determined by our environmental exposures. So imagine we are born with certain genetic determinations, but the environments that we live in play a very important role in determining how those play out. So it is a very, very core aspect of public health. So even as teachers of public health, as Dr. Sincere and I are, we place a lot of attention on these aspects of the environment that largely can be controlled so that we can have more optimum health.
Right. So there are a number of things that we can consider. When we speak of the environment, of course, the air, water, housing, waste disposal, and all of these things can directly impact our health. So let's take them, one at a time, as we say. And I think it would be very appropriate to start with air or the atmosphere, considering now that we're seeing massive volumes of Sahara dust coming in our direction. In fact, just in the news this evening, the experts are saying that 2027, because of the El Nino, it's highly possible that this year could be the hottest year on record. And of course, with that, the heat Sahara dust, all of that, it can create a public health hazard. So Dr. Mitchell, let's start with the air, the atmosphere, and I think people, you hear a lot, people get up, oh boy, outside looks so hazy, and some people who don't understand, they tell you rain set up. Because that's how outside look when rain set up. But really and truly, it's the Sahara dust that is there. So let's talk let's start there.
Well, that's a fine place to start, because amongst all of the aspects of the environment, that's the one that interests me the most.
That's what I learned. I'm letting up I'm letting up the secret early.
There you go.
Yes.
Because, as you know, one cannot be expert on everything, but definitely air quality, that's something I do hold near and dear to my heart. But it is something that we have been looking at for the past couple of years, because as you correctly mentioned, Grenada and the Caribbean is no stranger to the Sahara dust phenomena. It's something that's quite prevalent. But you have heard anecdotes that it seems to be getting worse, and we seem to be having more intense storms or for longer periods. But the issue is we haven't really studied it, at least previously, in any great detail. So it makes it very difficult to make a conclusive statement on it. However, our team have recently started looking into this, and we've accessed data from the past 30 years or so. Took a very careful look at the trends over the years to see whether they're increasing, decreasing, if the intensities it's changing. And we've worked very closely, in fact, with the Grenada Meteorological Services, who are also quite interested in this phenomenon. And the truth is, we do have significant exposures to Sahara dust. In fact, this past weekend was what I would call a spectacular storm, because it has been quite intense for the past couple of days. And you would hear people say, well, my nose is giving me trouble, or I'm sneezing a lot, I don't know why, it's just hazy. No, it is actually the Sahara dust. And it is a very significant determinant of ill health. So it's important that we pay careful attention when we are experiencing those phenomena.
Right, wonderful.
Yeah, and Godfrey, if I can just jump in here, Dr. Mitchell is doing excellent work on air quality monitoring in Grenada. And, in respect to the Sahara desert dust, I think sometimes we need to pay a little bit more attention to our own reactions, let's call it that, right? It is an exposure, but if we pay some more attention to our reactions, for example, you hear people, and Dr. Mitchell mentioned, you might be congested or so on, but skin irritation, your skin becomes, you find yourself itching for no reason. That's also part of the issue. Your eyes are watering. But there's some more, deeper impact, if you want to call it that, of that Sahara desert dust, because, fine particles will get deep into your lungs. We can't see them. So we see people walking around with masks, and we're saying, well, it's so hot, how is that person wearing a mask, and so on. It is actually a good practice, right? Because that mask can potentially help with eliminating these very small particles that would get into your lungs and cause you to cough and wheeze and have shortness of breath and other, health issues, right? So just as throwing that out there, we have to be very much aware of how we're reacting to the Sahara desert dust and not just take it lightly.
Right, wonderful. Let me just add in this here. So we understand the danger of Sahara dust inhalation, but one of the things that is very prevalent in Grenada, in particular, around this time of year, is burning of bush. And people tend to burn a lot, and for different reasons. And sometimes, we try to understand, but I think we also have to teach people everything so that they understand. Now, I'm asking you here, with the constant burning of bush and smoke and particulate matter and all of that mixed with Sahara dust. Let's explain this a bit and its impact.
Well, that's a good question, Godfrey. The issue is we must think of air pollution not as any singular thing. So it's not just the Sahara dust or just the bush burning or any other thing, cars going up and down the street or construction work that's taking place. The issue is many of these activities, even the natural events, produce particles. And there are two types that we have to be careful with. There is the larger particle that we inhale, and it gets into our lungs, and it settles in the deeper regions of the lung and can cause respiratory illness. So persons who experience asthma and allergies, they may be at increased susceptibility to developing these symptoms. But in addition to that, some particles are so tiny they can penetrate the barrier and go into the circulatory system. And now that becomes what we consider a systemic toxic compound, because it can potentially go anywhere, to your brain, to your heart, to different parts of the body, and cause health effects. So studies are showing that persons who are exposed to poor air quality are at an increased risk of developing cardiovascular disease or worsening their cardiovascular disease. In some cases, there are studies that have shown issues with neurological deficits. So there are all kinds of health issues that can come about from exposure. Now, it's important to contextualize everything, because as public health practitioners, you don't want to create alarm without solution. That's very important. Not everyone would experience the same level of vulnerability. So when you get notifications, for example, from the Grenada Meteorological Service, they specifically would note how severe the event is and thus put out a warning for specific populations. So they may say, well, based on the Sahara dust that's going to happen in the next couple of days, persons who are sensitive should take precautions. Or maybe they may say the entire population should take precautions, because we all don't experience it equally. So some people are not bothered, whilst those sensitive populations are bothered. No, if it's Sahara dust, if it's bush burning, it's going to be exactly the same thing, because it generates, in part, particles, that can get into your lungs. But things like bush burning, would also produce other contaminants that we also have to be careful with, because you're combusting matter, so you're creating gases and different things that potentially can have toxic effects. So that leads, to another issue altogether. And I agree with you, we have to be very conscious about that. I know it's a cultural practice, but it's something we have to be sensitive about, because, there are persons in our community who can be severely affected by a simple act as burning bush in the yard.
Indeed.
Yeah.
But I want to go, and I'm coming to you, Dr. Sincere. I'm coming straight to you. Now, and I want us to go a little deeper, because I feel fine. I mean, I went, I did my medical, and the doctor says, hey, you great. They did all the tests, they checked my heart, bit is fine, everything. I'm okay. Tip-top shape. Why should I be concerned about what is happening in the environment? And because I'm good. Dr. Sincere, let me hear your comment.
You're good at this point in time, Godfrey.
Okay.
So you would have done your test, would have done your checkups and so on. You're good at this point in time. But you continue to be exposed, right? And that means that you can move, and we spoke about that 2 weeks ago. You can move from being well to becoming at risk and to becoming sick and then having to treat something, right? So let me use the bush burning as an example. You're well, you've checked up. The doctors gave you a clean bill of health, right? But here is an interesting thing, and I'm going to link it to bush burning and the anxiety that comes from that. And a lot of people do not think about that. So we think, well, it's bush burning, the smoke is going to affect our breathing, our respiratory system, and so on. But there are also mental health issues or stress that comes with bush burning, the anxiety that if this bushfire gets out of control, that raises your level of stress, right? The repeated exposure to smoke obviously would create some physical conditions, health concerns for you. But mentally, it puts you on edge as well. So you can't be comfortable. And we know what happens when we're not relaxed, when we're stressed out. So let's suppose the dry season lasts for 4 months, 5 months, right? And people are indiscriminately burning. Outside is dry, and these things get out of control very quickly. In fact, the police has put out a notice saying that there should be no burning at this point. I've seen it still been done, and it does cause some kind of anxiety, especially if it's in a densely populated area and the majority of people may have wooden houses, and there are concerns that come along with that. So the mental health aspect of bush burning, and again, people do not take these things into consideration. Dr. Mitchell, I'll hand over to you. What you have to say about
yes.
I completely agree. It is a very, very serious matter, and I know persons in my area who get very upset when the smoke starts to come up. So it does create significant anxiety. There's another issue that we have to think about, though. And this is something, again, culturally, we may not think of our health in the long term. So the question is, how long do we want to be healthy for?
Right.
One of the issues with things like air pollution, once it gets into your blood, into your circulatory system, it's causing health issues, but it's doing so through what is known as systemic inflammation. Now, that systemic inflammation can be considered a silent agitator. It's there causing the issues in your circulatory system, in your cardiovascular system, in your brains. If it crosses the barrier there, it's causing these issues, but at a small scale. The issue is, over a long period of time, those tiny agitations are what's ultimately going to cause the disease. Because things like heart disease, for example, is not something that develops overnight. It develops over a very long period of time of doing the wrong thing. And yes, we typically relegate that to diet and we don't do exercise. But even these environmental exposures are contributing factors to that. It's causing that continuous systemic inflammation that later on can, exacerbate some issue that we're having. So that's why it's important, even for healthy people, if they want to continue being healthy as they age. So it's a very good point.
Right. So it might be useful to say to people, look, you may not feel the effect immediately, but it doesn't mean that something is not brewing there. And sometimes we look all nice and dandy on the outside, but we don't know what's going on in there. Right. So sticking with air, of course, air quality, let's tie that in now with probably the second most important aspect of things, water. With all of the particles that are in the atmosphere, and we're talking a lot about Sahara dust, and some farmers and people in agriculture may tell you that there is a little advantage, because with the Sahara dust you get a little, fertilization for the soil, it helps with your plants and all of that, and fine, we accept that. But also, how can that impact the water that we so need for consumption?
Well, it's not likely to cause any impact or decrease in the quality of our water, not in any material way.
Okay.
Our local water authority, they're very good at getting our water clean and ready for us to drink. So the things that come from the soil is probably going to create a greater problem in the water quality than Sahara dust will.
Okay, all right.
I like that you mentioned the expression of the farmers, because they are so correct. That's exactly the purpose of Sahara dust. In fact, it has been said that that's one of the reasons the coral reefs in the Caribbean region are so flourishing, because of the Sahara dust phenomenon. So it's good to remind the public that it's not an unusual thing for Sahara dust to be coming across the region. It's part of the ecosystem. It's a good thing. It's good for fertilization, even along the Amazons in South America. It's just that because of the changing climate, it's coming with greater intensity, and typically during periods where we did not expect it to be here. And that's where the issues usually usually come around. So because of those changes, we now have to modify our behavior a bit just to ensure that we can adapt to the environmental change. But your water, don't worry about it. I think the water is going to be perfectly fine.
Okay. Yeah, we're going to come back to water maybe, in a different way, because it's all part of the environment. Another area, housing, and I think I'm going to come to Dr. Sincere with that one, because I would say in the Caribbean as a whole, there is the need for better housing, and especially now that we're experiencing climate change. Many people love their concrete houses and the style and all of that, but with that, the heat involved, and maybe sometimes we don't even realize it. So we're in a concrete structure, we cook in, and we like to cook oil down, and that in itself generates more heat in a heated house, and these are things that we probably don't pay attention to. But Dr. Sincere, our housing, what kind of consideration we should be giving now as it relates to our housing? Should we be building differently, maybe with more ventilation, or what is it? And then if we're going to go with ventilation and windows and so, then we also have to consider the intensity of the hurricanes, because they're going to mash up them windows and them very easy. So let's talk a little bit about that there.
Well, let me throw this out, right? Because I am not into architecture and so on, but I can speak from perhaps a female, a mother, a housewife kind of story, right? Where I would be in the kitchen, and of course I would want my house to be well ventilated. I think we have a lot of options these days, and we can be very much informed by builders as to what we should use, the type of windows, to make sure that our houses remain hurricane proof as far as possible, even if we're, in a situation where close to the sea or something, right? But as you specifically asked about the heat and then cooking in a kitchen or being in a house in the heat, I think ventilation is always something. When I was doing my house, that was one of the questions I had asked, right? So we need to be, and I mean, it's in any given building, I believe, right, Dr. Mitchell, any given building, we would want our spaces, our environment to be well ventilated so that we're getting as much fresh air as possible. I want to just join this to something, Godfrey. It may not necessarily be housing per se, but it is linked to having a house. And I've seen this practice across the years. Christmas is coming up and everybody wants to make their house look nice and bright. And we paint. But we do not open up or air out the house as much as we should. And we stay in these houses with the paint freshly painted, because we cannot afford to go to live somewhere else while our house is painted and it gets aired out and the smell, even if it's low fume, because I realize some of the paint companies are taking that into consideration, that the paint has low fume. But the fact that we're inhaling the paint puts us at risk. So I wanted to throw that out there, and maybe Dr. Mitchell can, expand on it. But this is something that we always do. We paint our houses, and we believe, it's okay, or we varnish our floors. It's the same fumes.
Yes.
When you smell it, it gives you a high, it gives you a lightheadedness sometimes, right? And we do not take these things into consideration. So even with respect to housing and ventilation, I believe this is a public health issue that we need to bring to the fore, because it's a practice that we see all the time.
Yes, indeed. Dr. Mitchell?
Absolutely. Dr. Sincere is on point with that. It's a very serious issue. Paint produces these volatile compounds that we inhale. The smell is something we should not be smelling, essentially. I think a very good recommendation, however, is, when we're thinking about environmental exposure in general, it's not to get frightened about everything around us. but it's to make better decisions to reduce our overall exposure, because unfortunately we can't eliminate all exposures.
Right.
But we can make a decision, a conscientious decision on what exposures we will allow and how we are going to allow them. And that reduces what is known as the body burden, the overall burden of these exposures on our body ultimately.
Right. Let's stick with housing. And Dr. Mitchell, I'm staying with you. And we going outside. We're moving outside. So even if we decided to go with a wooden house, which probably might be a little better when it comes to ventilation and keeping cool, but we want outside look nice, because when rain comes, we don't want to step in mud. So we're going to concrete the yard. We're going to build a nice concrete fencing and all of that. And so we could jump outside, rain or sun. Is that a good idea? Or should you do like me, and every chance you get, you plant a tree around your house?
I very much like your option. I would like a better option right there.
Yes.
So concrete is not bad. I too do not like to walk in mud, but I think we have to find a nice balance, don't we?
We should. Mm-hmm.
Yes. My wife and I, whenever we're driving, I'm always complaining about someone cutting down a tree, because, we're so, fortunate in Grenada to have so many trees.
Well, I always quarrel about that where I live. Always quarreling.
But it really does, apart from, keeping the place fresh and cool, it prevents us from being overexposed to the sun. It keeps the overall temperature down. They're very good at trapping dust, in fact, going back to our original topic. So, I mean, they're just a natural barrier that we should try to take full advantage of instead of eliminating them.
Dr. Cynthia?
Godfrey, there is nothing wrong with walking in mud. Actually, it's very therapeutic.
Walking in mud?
We did it when we were growing up. I see Dr. Mitchell smiling, and I see you. We did it when we were growing up, right? With our feet on the ground. And I mean, I have seen research that says that it's very therapeutic. It helps you to be grounded with your environment. And there are some potential health, positive health impacts of that. So you can walk on the ground in the mud and then always wash it off. But I agree with Dr.
Change your idea, Godfrey. Do some mud walking.
Yeah, definitely.
But I agree with Dr. Mitchell on, planting the trees. I totally agree with him on that. In fact, I have a back garden, and I love, doing that. Not only does it keep that particular area of the property nice and cool, you can actually go in there, have a seat, and even if it's hot out to the front where there are no trees, you can actually go to the back and, sit and just relax in a shaded area. And it does give you that kind of rejuvenation as well. So while we're talking, environment, we also have to speak to these, abilities to get rejuvenated by being in good external environmental spaces that allows us to renew and rejuvenate.
Right, excellent. So my next question, in terms of families, what can we do in terms of maybe what simple steps can we take to reduce exposure to environmental contaminants, things that can create a problem for us? How can we mitigate? As Dr. Mitchell said, we may not be able to stop everything, but I'm sure there are a lot that we can, minimize.
Right. So, again, I agree with Dr. Mitchell. There is no way we could control for everything. We can control for some things, but we can't control for everything. What is within our scope of control? Obviously, we need to exercise our ability to do that, right? So, for example, with the Sahara Desert dust, you may not need to go outside, or if you do have to go outside, you can wear a mask, right? And that's a simple way of, controlling the exposure to the dust. In fact, I believe I saw a warning or an alert or a caution to that effect, right? Some things we don't really need to do. If we have to do it, then fine. But if we don't need to do it, then we can stay away and not increase our exposure to it. Going back to the same, paint, there is no need for us to be in the house we can go outside, go to the, the yard, go to the garden, right? Once it's safe enough that we leave our windows and so on open so that we do not increase our exposure to that, right? So there are some personal things that we can do. We call those behavioral aspects of public health, yes? Things that we ourselves and as individuals can do to control or reduce our exposure to these health concerns or effects. Yeah.
Right, wonderful. So, Dr. Mitchell, apart from Sahara dust and smoke and some of these other things that can, seriously impact our air, the atmosphere, one of the things that can also create, some impact is waste disposal. Let's talk a little bit about that, especially now in the dry season where water is a little limited. It's less than normal. Let's talk around that, waste disposal and maybe how we keep our communities in terms of cleanliness and how that is connected to maybe, interfering with the nice clean air that we should be breathing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a very good observation, especially during the dry season. Keeping your homes and the surrounding of your home clean it becomes a bit of a challenge, especially those of us who have to deal with dust, for example. But I think going back to Dr. Sincere's original recommendation on ventilation, at least indoors, that can play a massive role in ensuring that we have a cleaner indoor environment. So we want to do what we can to keep the house clean. I mean, it's not something to be underestimated. Sometimes you may complain that the house is being swept every day. That's a good thing. That actually helps reduce significant exposures indoors. When we think of dust indoors, we may think of the dust that comes from outdoors, which is partly true. But all of our furniture and different things in our house is off-gassing compounds, and those ultimately settle in the dust. We need to get those out by cleaning. So we keep our homes as clean as possible. We keep our yards and outside as clean as possible. And that goes a very long way in reducing our exposure. And I don't know if you allow me to go off on a slight tangent because I thought it may have been good in the previous comment. But, with all of the exposures we have, whilst we can't control them all, one of the things we all can do is definitely give our body the best chance it can to fight some of these exposures. And let's try to be healthy. Because fortunately, our body has very, very important detoxifying organs, including our liver and our kidney. So we have to ensure we eat properly, we do exercise, we get our sleep, we ensure we maintain optimum health, because many of these exposures are actually going to be detoxified by our body.
Right.
So, doing that two-pronged approach can do much to give us good life.
Right. Excellent indeed. Let's talk now about, because with the environment, there are some wonderful things, but if not maintained, it can create some problems. And things like dengue, chikungunya, and all of these things now come to the fore. And with rising global temperatures, we know that insects, they tend to reproduce at a faster rate. So we're going to have more mosquitoes. And strangely enough, Dr. Mitchell, there are some people who have no problem with mosquitoes, but we'll leave that there. That's for another discussion. But
I would like to know how that conversation went. But
on the next program, we'll get there. But so let's talk a bit about that, because we're talking about keeping our communities clean, and we know, as Dr. Nixon usually tell me, all a mosquito needs is a drop of water on a leaf, and you might be surprised what that can do. So let's talk about diseases and, of course, the environment, its correlation to public health.
So that's crucial. I mean, keeping our environment clean is not just getting rid of the dust, it's making sure we don't have garbage and things around our homes that would allow water to settle in it. And, in the Caribbean, in Grenada in particular, those of us who have lived here for a very long time or forever, we have been constantly exposed to those campaigns to ensure there's no standing water. That type of advice is gold. It's crucial because, as Dr. Nixon would mention, and I know her quite well,
yes.
just that drop of water that could be more than enough. And the issue is, in the dry season, we sometimes ignore that to be an issue because you say, well, it's not raining, so we don't have to think too much about that. But sometimes the water has been standing there for a very long time and we didn't realize.
Yeah.
So we should avoid collecting things around the house and, get rid of the garbage that needs to be gotten rid of. And, sometimes we're thinking of a big, bucket or a drum or something. No, it could be plastic, a plastic bag that was inappropriately disposed of. It formed a little crevice and the water settled, and that's more than enough. So we want to ensure there is no garbage around the house at all. Not only does it make your surroundings look very pleasant, but it actually goes a long way in protecting us from these vector-borne diseases.
Yes, indeed. Dr. Sensei, recently we're hearing about this outbreak. The name just left me now. In the U.S. and wherever. The name left me. But it had some connection with the rats.
Hantavirus.
There we go. Yeah, hantavirus with rats. And we have rats here. I don't know if we have the virus here, but I know we have rats. And of course, we know what rats like. So the same garbage that Dr. Mitchell is referring to, they're also flies. So they are insects and other rodents and other things. They probably may not go for the water, but they go for the other filthy areas, and they too can be a threat because we know what rats can do. Let's talk a little bit about that, especially in terms of maybe encouraging our communities to do community cleanups. I recall as a younger fella, it was something that happened a lot. We didn't wait on like the bushing programs or to come to our community to do the cleaning for us. We would get up in the morning and have to sweep our gap and sweep the yard before we go to school. You don't see these things anymore. Let's talk a bit about that, Dr. Sensei.
That's an interesting point that you're raising, Godfrey, as we talk in public health and and the environment. So garbage collection is a big deal for me. Being, with solid waste, the deputy chair of that board, we try a lot, hard, to educate people on this garbage collection. In fact, I know that solid waste remove the communal bins for this particular reason, the rodents, the rats that, were always there. I know people got a little annoyed and so on, but now you have scheduled pickups of garbage. So I know it's a behavior change, it's behavior modification, right? We are accustomed with just putting the garbage out in a bin, or what I'm seeing is people using barrels, right? And those barrels also collect water, mind you, that help with breeding of mosquitoes. So that's another thing that we have to, guard against. But the garbage collection, perhaps we can get people to, respect the collection dates and times some more. For example, Thursday being a holiday, Solid Waste Management has put out an advisory. These would be your pickup days, given that Thursday is a holiday, or the time that it would, right? But some people still do not pay attention to that, potentially ignoring the health impact or concerns that may arise simply from, putting the garbage out or throwing out the garbage in, places where they should not. For example, I have had people reach out saying, we have this concern that the rivers people are dumping garbage in the rivers, right? Big concern, because whether we believe it or not, some people do drink the river water. I'm not saying it's a good practice, but some people do that, right? So the more we educate people on good practices in relation to solid waste management, and we do have an issue, Godfrey. A couple of years ago, I went to the Perseverance landfill, and the cells were filling up. We're running out of space for solid waste disposal. So obviously we have to now get into this mode of recycling, reusing, repurposing, and so on, so that we do not put ourselves in a situation where we do not have proper areas for garbage disposal, right? We say try to buy as much as possible things that are not plastic, because we know what happens. But then we see with the influx of vehicles, we get tires.
Yeah.
And the tires are left out in the environment. Rain falls, the mosquitoes breed. We do not dispose properly of the tires. And I know some companies, and I'm saying this with no apologies, that some companies are guilty of throwing tires indiscriminately, even though the Solid Waste Management Authority takes the tires and, in fact, looking into different options for reusing and repurposing the tires.
Dr. Mitchell?
So that's a big concern.
Yeah, so no, that's a very significant issue. I completely agree with Dr. Sensei on that. But I think, what's coming out of this conversation is we don't need, fancy solutions. These are all just simple behavioral modifications that each and every one of us can contribute to. So ultimately, to protect our own health and environment, it's really up to us as individuals, and we can do a lot. Grenada, we're fortunate to have a very small population, so with just a little bit of effort, I am certain that the impact can be quite large.
No, definitely. And Dr. Sensei spoke about the garbage earlier. And I've seen it myself. People, they don't pay attention to the collection. They just put the garbage by the road. Then dogs come. They just, and we know how dogs behave, and it becomes a problem. So then you have garbage scattered all over the place, and I don't think it's fair to the people who work, in the collection, because you don't have to go around and picking up people's garbage. Could have been placed in a bag, neatly tied, and you know when the vehicle's going to come, and you take it out. So you're right, Dr. Mitchell, there are a lot of things that we can do that can help, address the environmental problems, that can create public health hazards. But I want to go to an area that now I am very passionate when it comes to climate change. Very, very, very passionate when it comes to that. So with the changing weather patterns, more intense hurricanes, we have heat waves now well into the hurricane season. When we should be getting a hurricane, we get a heat wave, and so the weather patterns are changing. With that, are we from where you sit in public health, are we seeing any new health challenges arising?
Well, I think one of the things, if I may comment first, is the key issue for us in the region, in Grenada at least, is the evidence that's suggesting that the temperatures are going up. In fact, this was not the intention, but we did some research on the air quality matter, and one of the pieces of data we collected from the Met Office was temperature over the past 20-something years or so. And it's a slight, but it's a notable increase in one direction, definitely going up. And I think people are complaining of that. The issue with temperature is that an increase in temperature increases our susceptibility to all kinds of diseases. Now, we haven't looked at that here in Grenada, but studies have shown that with an increase in temperature, in any given day, in larger countries where we have sufficient population, the hospitals would see an increase in persons coming to the emergency room for heart attacks and strokes and different things. Those health outcomes are directly related to temperature. They're considered, the effects of heat stress. So I think that's one area, and persons who are susceptible to cardiovascular disease, maybe the older persons in our community are otherwise vulnerable. When it's hot, it's something to take very seriously. It can really have a significant negative impact on the health in an acute sense. Yeah. And that's just one example. That's just one example for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I agree, Dr. Mitchell. And, in preparing for a lecture, I did some research into that, the intensity of the heat and what it's causing. But I just want to jump in, Godfrey, and perhaps mention some of the indirect health impacts of, climate change.
Yes.
We hear it a lot, right? With the intensity of the hurricanes and flooding and so on, we also have to think about food security, which is a public health issue, right? We touched on it last time, but again, look around us. Let's see what is growing that we used to have before that we're not having now, and how is that affecting us? If we do not have, a wide variety of nutritious food, then we've been placed in a situation where our health will be impacted. There are some cases where, there are food deserts, as I mentioned before. So this is a public health issue. As the intensity of these hurricanes and floods and weather conditions and patterns increase, so does our anxiety about, not just food security, but also about the vector-borne diseases, as Dr. Mitchell said. Warmer weather conditions make for, increased dengue, mosquito, this, that, the next. And also, indirectly, water supply, because rising sea levels and flooding and so on has the potential to contaminate our drinking water. And, we will have a challenge with that. Or even if it's drought, right? We're experiencing a drought pattern or a period of drought, then it puts us in a compromised situation. And this is not about doom and gloom, because, I believe we have been making very good steps in educating people that we can take proactive measures, that we can prepare, that we can prevent, right? Remember, I mentioned when we did the last session that public health is largely preventive.
Yes.
So we try to get people educated, promote health and so on as much as possible. And if we become at risk or susceptible to something, then we can, address it effectively. So again, my push for educating and engaging populations. And something, Godfrey, in all of these conversations, we did not emphasize that we say public health. Public health is population health, community health, right? But individual behaviors can put a population or a community at risk.
Very much so.
Let's talk COVID-19.
Oh, yes. Right? Oh, definitely.
Right? So. One contaminated person can, infect a larger population, infectious or communicable diseases, we call that. So, yeah, I just wanted to put that plug there.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned education earlier, because the next question I want to ask, so we know that education is very critical in everything. What the discussion we're having here, I'm sure people are picking up pointers as we go along, with things that they can do and maybe should not do. So aside from educating, and I'm maybe going to go a little at the policy level. So how can, let's say, local authorities and communities and maybe, so for example, our Ministry of Health, and even maybe some non-governmental organizations in our communities like churches and other groups, how can they help, or what can they do to help create healthier living environments? And maybe we could probably start at and maybe look at what from the ministerial level, the Ministry of Health, because they have that mandate to sort of direct things and put it out there.
Right. So again, I'm sure that's not related to the Ministry of Health, but and policies. I believe that there are ample policies. From my perspective, it's the enforcement of the policies, or the consistency with which the policies are enforced, right? So remember, I highlighted the gap with the capacity right? So sometimes we may start something, but because we do not have the capacity to continue it, and it must be done in a consistent, continuous manner to ensure the public's health. So we may start, we have a task force or we have a unit and so on, but resources become depleted relatively quickly, and things that might have been started may not continue. I commend, however, some of the efforts that I see happening. For example, again, solid waste has discontinued communal bins. That's a very good thing, right? So the garbage collection, and it is very, very effective, I would say, because people know these are the days, and most times people stick to their days, right? Let's look at mosquito control. We have the vector control units that go around and do their work, routinely do their work, right? So I believe they're doing quite a lot in this regard. So I push back again to say that it is our individual behaviors as a person, or behaviors as an individual family, behaviors as a community, yes, as a society. We need to take responsibility, because I see a lot of the times, fingers are pointed maybe at government or at educators or at somebody without really taking our responsibility,
yes,
taking that into
we pass the blame on everybody else except ourselves.
Yes, and we do have a role to play. I see Dr. Mitchell unmuting, so I know he.
Yes, indeed. So,
I just wanted to ditto that. I think it's so important to highlight the individual component. Sometimes when persons listen to, researchers and teachers and so on speak about the problems that we have, they sometimes leave the conversation feeling that they do not have any power to do anything about it. That feeling of disempowerment. But the contrary is actually true. We have individual power in this sense. We can make some significant changes just in our immediate environment that can ultimately impact our health and well-being. So, things like installing trees around our house, that can reduce the temperature in our house. That would ensure that we don't have the effects of heat stress, for example, during the peak of the dry season. Cleaning the drains around a house would prevent a house from becoming flooded should there be an issue with the rain. The small behaviors can ultimately impact the way we experience our environment. So we want everyone to feel empowered, that they can individually make a choice. Even going back to our original discussion on the Sahara dust, the Grenada Meteorological Service puts out announcements through their WhatsApp channel. We just need to follow the channel.
Yeah, and pay attention, yes.
They would specifically say, listen, today is a day that if you're sensitive or vulnerable to this, be careful. That's giving you power to make a decision to either not go out that day or maybe wear a mask or something of the sort, but you can prevent yourself from getting sick under those circumstances. So it's about looking, using the education, but to help us individually make better choices in our day-to-day life. That can do a lot to empower us.
Right.
And share that information as well, because a lot of the information is at our fingertips. We have it, we see it, but we don't share it. That's also a responsibility, individual responsibility on our part to share the information.
Yeah, indeed. Let's talk a little bit quickly about maybe the two most vulnerable groups of people in our societies: our young children and our elderly, and tie that into the picture. Inhalation of Sahara dust, the environmental impacts, the improper disposal of waste, and all of these things. We know our young children and our elderly, and in the case of our elderly, especially those who are not in a position maybe to take care of themselves, they don't have anybody, and they're on their own, they probably don't have the information, and they're at high risk. Let's talk a bit about that. How do we reach people like that? Should we encourage our communities to be our brother's keeper and go out there and show that these people are safe? Because they're important people. They laid foundations for us.
I want to take a jab at the young people, the children. Godfrey,
All right, sure,
the children.
sure. Mm-hmm.
Because you see, we call them, perhaps a vulnerable population, especially if they already have some kind of, compromised situation, whether it's, asthma or something, right? But they're children and they would want to go outside, they would want to run about, they would want to enjoy themselves. So we now have to think about how can we keep the children entertained, I would say, but still safe enough, right? And again, sometimes we do not think about that. Even if they're not compromised, have any health conditions whatsoever. But the fact that we are discarding garbage indiscriminately, right? Children like to go outside. They run about, they're on the ground, they're rolling, So we have to take that into consideration as to how we dispose of our garbage, and the sorts of environment we expose them to. But we also have children are like sponges. They pick up everything. In Teachers College, we were told, if you teach a child something, chances are that entire family is going to do that behavior modification. Mm-hmm. Let's take hand washing, for example. Miss says, and the child goes home with Miss says, you must wash your hands with soap and water, sing this song, and I've had to experience that, right? The child comes home and Miss says, and Miss says, and Miss says. You hear Miss says so often that you actually engage in the behavior because you're tired of hearing Miss says, right? But we do have to take into consideration that there are children who are not necessarily healthy, right? Or as healthy as they should be. We have things like juvenile diabetes being an issue, right? So we do have to take these at-risk populations into consideration with any intervention that we're going to make. And also, our behaviors, again, comes back to behaviors, right? How we behave as individuals and as families and communities, taking into consideration that we have a responsibility to our young people. Social justice, Dr. Mitchell, the social justice of public health.
Dr. Mitchell, just before you coming, I'm listening to Dr. Sincere, and it seems as if we have been outnumbered by the ladies. All I'm hearing is Miss says, and yes, sir, say, or sir, say.
Well, the truth about it is teaching is a caring profession, and you find more ladies getting into teaching and nursing because those are considered caring professions, and ladies are predisposed. They were made like that.
Dr. Mitchell, we won't comment. We won't respond to that, Dr. Mitchell. Let's just continue.
Let's leave it on the air.
Let's just continue.
But I do want to support Dr. Sincere because I'm thinking back. I'm a very big fan of the environment now. But when I reflect on my first experience with pro-environment activities, I think back to the 1980s when we had those Keep Grenada Clean campaigns on TV.
Oh, yes.
Those campaigns were instrumental in our generation not throwing garbage on the street because they were everywhere on TV. Mm-hmm. So as Dr. Sincere mentioned, children are sponges.
Yeah.
Invariably, if you teach a child to do something, everyone in the family is likely to follow suit. Whether they want it or not, the child is going to make sure that they do because that's what they learned to be the correct thing to do. So I think we can use them as a key aspect of improving our environment. But I guess we should also speak about our older ones because we don't avoid them. It is our responsibility to ensure that they're well taken care of, but I think they're also a source of wisdom.
Oh, yeah.
Invariably find that, just discussing some of the issues we have now with them, you're going to get some recommendations that you probably did not think about. So we shouldn't view them as being off to the side, but instead, that a source of wisdom that we can go to deal with some of the issues that we are dealing with these days. But definitely it is our responsibility to keep them healthy. So all of the garbage and so on around the homes, and if they are exposed to the same vector-borne diseases we are, likelier they are going to have a worse health outcome. So it's a very serious responsibility on our part to make sure that they're not exposed.
Yes, yes, indeed. So there was one other area that I wanted us to look at, or did we? Yes, I think we did. So also the emerging environmental health threats. I think I asked that earlier, but I want to go back to it because I want to tie that into with climate change, because we know that, for example, many of our people who do outdoor work, our construction workers, our sportsmen and sportswomen, our police officers, you see them on the streets day in, day out, and we know the kind of attire that they wear, and it could be very, very hot. Should we start maybe having some more discussions and probably start reconsidering how things are done, that is in the interest of ensuring the safety of our people?
Well, definitely, and I know the conversations have already started, which is a very good thing. I know we are now making positive steps in the direction of improved occupational health and safety, and that is the issue that you're raising. So whilst we'll allow those policies to be enacted and steps to be taken, I think it's important for the public to also be aware that it's not business as usual. We're accustomed to just putting on a random T-shirt and going and do construction. No, this is a different level of UV radiation from the sun that we're getting right now. So yes, you have to protect your skin. You have to wear a long sleeve. Yes, you should wear a hat. You should wear sunglasses if possible. Protective gear when you're on the site in the first place. But these are all protective measures that we have to start taking seriously, because we used to have a more laissez-faire attitude towards occupational health, but it is along with environmental exposures, one of the most significant determinants of health. So again, take away the genetic factors, the things we do at work and the places we live and work, or the things that are going to determine whether or not we live to be ripe and old, as the old people would say.
And especially where we work, Godfrey, because let's think about our day, right? A normal day. We spend more time at work than we do. So it is imperative that we pay close attention to occupational health, where we work. Dr. Mitchell said where we work and live. Yes, where we live, and a lot heavily on where we work, because we spend more time there, which means that if there is anything in that environment, we're going to be exposed to it for a longer period than if we're at home. So I want to also agree with him that, the conversations have started on protective gear. I mean, I still see some kind of laissez-faire attitude to how people go to work, dressed how they go to work, right? And we're hoping over time, with more education, with more engagement, with more discussions, with more on the job. We do a lot of on the job, but not on the non-traditional jobs. So going to a construction site, for example, and just having a conversation with the guys who are not wearing any gloves, they're not sometimes wearing hard hats, they're not wearing the boots, they're not wearing the protective gear that they're supposed to wear, and so on. Perhaps having those sorts of conversations. We do have to, take our campaigns outside, our health campaigns outside of the traditional box that we have them in, because, things are taking place so quickly. You ask about emerging environmental health concerns and so on. So we have to make sure, again, that we take this preventive disposition as opposed to a reactive disposition where we're reacting. Let's try to prevent as much as possible. So we do the upstream work so that we do not get too much of problems down the live stream.
Right. Dr. Sensi, I want to stay with you. Next question. And we're looking here into the future. Technology and innovation. How can we use technology, to help, address the issues of environmental and public health?
I am smiling because I'm going to hand this over to Dr. Mitchell, who is very much interested in technology and
great.
AI.
There we go.
And I can chime in.
There we go.
So, Dr. Mitchell, you're in the hot seat.
Yes.
We should play ball and hand it back again.
Yes.
But it depends on the technology. I know for one, in terms of cars, for example, I see Grenadians are moving quite heavily towards the electrification.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So we know a lot of electric cars are being imported, which potentially can be a very good thing because it reduces our contribution to the greenhouse gases.
That's right.
On the roads, I know we don't usually pay very much attention to this, but the issue of road noise is a very significant issue in Grenada. Mm-hmm. It's very, it can be very disturbing. And noise is also a significant determinant of ill health. It's something we don't pay much attention to. But the more we go towards electric vehicles and so forth, that's likely to be a positive outcome. Of course, there are things we have to be careful with because they are powered by lithium-ion batteries and so on. So we have to ensure we have plans in place to dispose of them appropriately when the time comes. But those are positive moves. It shows that we're thinking as a population on these things. But it's interesting because most people probably would not have purchased an electric car because they love the environment. They probably purchase it because it's cheaper for them to use and that you don't have to purchase gas. But that's the interesting paradigm. The issue is most activity that's pro-environment is better for the pocket.
Yeah.
So that's the easiest way to sell anything to take care of the environment. Whatever is good for the environment is usually good for the pocket. So it's good to see that as a country, individuals are making those pro-environmental decisions that's ultimately going to benefit them in the long run.
Right. That's
engaging more too. Yeah, I'm sorry. We see people engaging more in the environment as well. We see more people going out on hikes and, just making use of the environment to benefit their overall well-being.
Doing
exercise more of that every day.
Doing exercise is an investment in the future. How does it benefit your pocket? You don't have to go to the doctor as often because you maintain optimum health. So it's true,
Right. But while there are many of us who love to go walking and enjoy the environment, there are also those of us, as Uncle Gary said once, when they had asked him about the demonstration in the 70s, why people he said, no, they're not demonstrating. These are my people. They just love to jump up. They're jumping up. So aside from that, we have our people who like the fete. So the barbecues and the limes and of course the alcohol consumption and all of these things. And in addition to all of that, there is the heat exposure. Dr. Mitchell, what would you say to these people? And we're not in any way saying, hey, you cannot go out and have a good time. But of course, in everything, you have to pay attention. If you want to improve your wellness and to remain healthy, there are things that you should and should not do. So to those who love to be out there and fetting and drinking and doing whatever, what would you say to them?
Well, it's a matter of being balanced.
Right.
It's a matter of being balanced. Nothing taken to the extreme is a good thing, and that's the point. Even things like excess consumption of alcohol is a serious health issue. And we know that there are people in Grenada who have had negative health issues associated with their excess consumption of alcohol. So it's important to take it seriously and bring it back a bit because these are little investments in your health, the little investments that would pay off in the long term. So it's a matter of balance.
Yeah, and Godfrey, that alcohol whether we want to believe it or not, alcohol makes us lose fluid quicker, right?
Yeah.
So in a hot weather and you're drinking alcohol, you're actually giving yourself a double whammy right there. So you may find that when you drink alcohol and outside is hot, and then you add the loud music to that, you start feeling nauseous or you start feeling dizzy, headache, and so on. All of that combined is putting you at some risk.
Right. So there's another thing as it relates to our citizens, and of course the institutions, the stakeholders who are involved in a lot of different things. So, for example, and let me, Dr. Sensei, I'm going to take a little jab at you and solid waste, and not that you're doing anything wrong, not at all. Solid waste, they do an excellent job in my area. It can be guaranteed. Every Tuesday, I can tell you what time they're gonna pass. So they're doing a good job. But and just use them as an example because of the role that they play, very important role. And so we not consider other stakeholders who have a part to play in ensuring that our environment remains safety. So how can our communities, our people, hold them responsible or keep them in line to ensure that they do not falter? And not forgetting also our responsibility as citizens to ensure that we do the right thing, to ensure now that the stakeholders do what they're supposed to do.
Right, and I believe there is a mechanism in place for that. So, for example, there are hotlines in some cases where you can call, you see someone, anonymously call and give information. Right? But just a simple conversation with your neighbor, this is going to impact all of us, right? In the situation where, let's say, solid waste doesn't come, and I can attest that I called solid waste to say, is the garbage truck late? Because, they didn't come on time. And a proper explanation was given to me that based on the time, the period, Carnival, Christmas time, the volume of waste is increased. So whereas normally the garbage truck would make one trip, now it has to make 2 or 3 trips to get the volume of garbage out. So, me being me, I picked up the phone and I called to find out, at this point, why is my garbage not picked up as yet? And like you, I have days, Tuesdays and Fridays routinely, unless there is some public holiday or something that they would pick up. So it doesn't always have to be in a confrontational manner, but just to find out, I am seeing this happening. Why is this happening? How can I help with this? And again, just sharing the information. We have to hold each other accountable. People would, see things and say, well, I'm seeing this. A gentleman reached out and said, well, I see some dumping happening in this area, so I decided to draw your attention to it. And I had to, draw solid waste management attention to it, as well as, my social responsibility. That's outside of me having any connection with the authority at all. We all have that social responsibility to our community, our country, I believe. And maybe more of us should take that seriously, our social responsibility in terms of our environment, because in the long run, Godfrey, this is going to affect all of us.
It will.
This is going to affect all of us because the cost of healthcare is rising, right? So the more of us can engage to help each other along the life stream of health, so that we do not encounter too many of these difficult situations, the better. So if it means me holding your hand now, calling you and say, Godfrey, we're exercising for the week this week.
Yeah.
That's my social responsibility.
Yeah. No. As simple as it may sound, but very, very, very important and impactful. Sometimes we miss the things that appear to be simple. We miss the volume of importance to it. We do. So, Dr. Mitchell, my final question, And while we spoke about it in the beginning, but I want to ask it again, so we use it as a summary of this evening's discussion. So many people do not make the connection between the surroundings and the health. So can we once again just speak briefly on how things like the air quality, water quality, sanitation, and waste disposal directly influence our well-being? So maybe Dr. Mitchell, you can take part and Dr. Cincy can take the other half, and then we'll wrap for this evening.
Sounds good. So I'll start and maybe end with the air.
Oh, sure.
Because that's where we are.
Yes.
So
yes.
no, but it really, the point that we wanted to make at the beginning again is these exposures may not impact us acutely immediately. So you and I might be healthy. We may not have any issues with allergies or any other issue that would otherwise affect other persons. We go out into the Sahara dust and everything is fine. But all of these exposures, the Sahara dust, the bush burning, the exposure to the car fumes, the paint, the excess consumption of bottled water, for example, all of these little things are small exposures that cause little bouts of inflammation throughout our body. That's ultimately going to cause diseases to be exacerbated as they develop later on. So we may have a genetic disposition to develop heart disease. We don't necessarily have to develop heart disease. It's really the environment that we live in and work in that's going to likely determine whether or not we develop that. The same thing could go for many of the other diseases. For example, cancer is a very big issue in the Caribbean and around the world, in fact. And we all say, well, cancer runs in the family. That may be true. But for cancer to develop, there are a number of different things that need to happen, including some environmental exposure that causes the cancer to develop, even though you had a genetic predisposition.
Right.
So it really highlights that our environment plays such a crucial role in our health. We could have the worst genes, but if we live in a very good, clean environment, avoiding excess exposures to toxic environments, we can do a large part in preventing many of the diseases we deal with from developing in the first place. It may not work for all of us, but largely, many of us might be able to avoid a lot of these issues if we just take care of our exposures, our environmental exposures.
Right.
So I hope that empowers our audience to sort of take stock, look around. What am I exposing myself to that I could control? Is there something I could do? Open my windows maybe? Or maybe choose a different kind of paint or paint less, using the example of the person said. Maybe sweep the house more. All of these little things. We want to ensure that we take individual ownership of them and we can help protect our health to some extent.
Yes, indeed. We also have water quality. Maybe you can take this one and I leave the other two for Dr. Cynthia since she's very close to them.
There you go. Yes. Well, we have to be careful with our water for sure. The good thing is Grenada largely has very, very good water. We have very clean water and most persons would drink water from the tap perfectly fine, and I'm one of them. We have really good water. We have to drink a lot more of it. Maybe that's
right.
something
right.
to be careful.
Yes.
And if anyone lives near at one of the dams that NOASA controls, I think they should take individual responsibility in ensuring it's kept clean, because again, it impacts the entire community. But our water quality in Grenada largely is quite commendable. We just need to ensure we keep it up.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. So, Dr. Sincere, sanitation, waste disposal, how does that directly influence our well-being?
Well, I think we really captured the essence of that in sanitation, and I'm going to link it obviously with solid waste work with garbage disposal, collection, recycling, and so on, right? It is part of the environment, or could become an environmental concern if it is not done properly. Once it's in the environment, as Dr. Mitchell highlighted, it will affect your health. So it has to be considered in terms of controlled exposure, yes, to poor waste management. And it starts again from your home to the community and to the larger community. So if we start at home and take responsibility for what is happening, we're cultivating habits. And over the years, I tend to like to use children as examples, because what the children are seeing at home is what they would most likely go out into the community and do, right? So the more that we can expose our children, and we're trying to break a culture. Growing up, I know I've seen it. I've never participated in it, but I've seen it, people throwing garbage out of cars and,
yes.
Big problem, big, I would say frustration for me at this point, because we've heard so much about, as Dr. Mitchell said, keep Grenada clean and, dispose of your waste responsibly and so on. But if we take that kind of approach from home, and I have to say here, I will raise my hand and say in some areas I'm guilty, because I believe I need to do some more of the garbage from the kitchen, like your banana peel and so on. I need to really compost, right? I need to get into composting. So I am guilty of not composting, I will say that. But I think if we start cultivating those habits from home of putting your garbage in a bag, I don't know if people, realize that, you can't just indiscriminately throw things out your window. You could be fined and confined because there is a law for that. If you have, a receptacle, simply hold it. I hold stuff in my vehicle until I reach home because I want to dispose of it properly.
Yes.
Right? And that's a simple habit that we can engage in. Then we can go out in the community. I have challenges with my environment. I complain to the people who are in charge of certain aspects, and I'll say that our sporting facilities, the people come out, the play parks and the playing fields and so on, and we have so much fun, and then we leave our garbage right there. We could walk with a garbage bag, and when we're leaving, leave with our garbage, because we know there are no bins, communal bins again, and that's where we're behaving responsibly with our garbage disposal. So those are some simple things. It doesn't take, a big campaign that we have to go out and we can take very simple steps individually, as a person, as a family, as a community, and say, hey, I don't want rats in my community, because we do know that rats is associated with leptospirosis, right?
Yep.
We can definitely control for that. So if we all take that kind of proactive, preventive disposition to our health and our public's health, then, it's going to come back home. If we don't do it, it's going to come back to us, because, keep your environment clean, encourage your neighbors, you will not see rats in the environment.
That's right.
If you don't keep yours clean, you will see rats coming. They become, they breed, they infest the entire community. Everybody gets frustrated and is put at a risk.
Yes, indeed. Dr. Sincere, Dr. Mitchell, I thank you all so very much for, making yourselves available, to be here with me to have this wonderful discussion. I just want to encourage folks out there, together with what both Dr. Mitchell and Dr. Sincere said. I think Dr. Mitchell mentioned it earlier, noise pollution. That is an environmental issue as well, especially when you have elderly folks in communities and you have some of these folks with these vehicles revving it up and making it's very unpleasant for our senior citizens, so let's try and avoid it. Let's be a little considerate. The burning, please be careful, and it's very windy these days, so all it needs is just for the wind to take a little bit of that, and you know what can happen. So let's be very conscious of our environment. Our environment can determine our wellness in a significant way. All right. So Dr. Mitchell, Dr. Sincere, I thank you all so very much. And let me say this, Dr. Mitchell, you mentioned that some levels of research has been going on now. So I am making the first plea for the findings of the research to be released right here on this program. I'm sure I'm the person who's asking first, so I'm going to, and I can be a pest, so I will be constantly asking so that I have you both right back here, to get it. Because I think when research is done, it's very important. That way people understand. This is not, anybody just saying what their mind tell them, but we have data, to prove that what has been said is factual, and so they need to pay attention to it. So again, thank you all very much. It was indeed a pleasure, and I'm looking forward to having you back. In fact, I think I'm going to plan a public health forum and have the team from SU come on, and so we can go into more detail. I mean, I can sit here and chat with you all night. I have two bits of so much, but nevertheless, all good things must come to an end. So thank you all very much again, folks. Thank you for staying with us. I trust that at least there is one thing you can take away from this evening's discussion, and please apply it so you can improve your wellness. Thank you. All the best. Do have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.